You choose.
Okay, and as I speak, could you give me a feedback that you are hearing me okay?
Sound great.
Okay, excellent. So good afternoon, everybody. I am Judit Olah. I'm with Regis University at the Anderson College of Business and Computing. I am associate professor and chair of the data science department. I'm also program director for our health informatics program. Prior to Regis University, I worked in clinical informatics setting for 7 years. And prior to that, I was full-time academics in a really traditional classroom, auditorium type of setting on the East Coast, Queens College, actually in New York City. So when I'm sharing my examples regarding online teaching modalities, I'm comparing it to the experiences I had when I was an in-classroom assistant professor coming up the ranks, having to deal with the students in a really large auditorium type setting and public university setting. So in that context, I feel like there is an emerging need to rethink the types of feedbacks that we are giving to the students. And I'm basing that sense, that emerging sense that I wanted to share my thoughts about, and I wanted to hear your experience about, is the conversations with students. So it's not scientific yet. It's anecdotal, what we're gathering, and it's sort of an emerging path of investigation for me. And that's why I envisioned this session this afternoon, that I would have a couple of slides as sort of catalyst to our thinking, and then have really specific questions. And I would love to get into a space of talking over each other and brainstorming. So let's get started. I want to take maybe the space of 2 slides, looking at how we evolved in terms of online education, where we are today, how the concept of student engagement evolved in the online framework, and again, get to my main idea, main concern really, to respond to my students in terms of structuring my feedback better and be a lot more intentional rather than sort of ad hoc and very situational in that sense. So again, presentation, and then open it up for a group exchange of ideas. My examples are coming from my current experience, which is graduate education. I firmly believe that what we are discussing here today cuts across all higher education modalities, formats, institutions, definitely cut across the different disciplines. So in that sense, use my examples and adapt it to your world as you're coming back and hopefully pushing back on some of the ideas that I'm moving forward. So online education started out as an innovation in terms of convenience. We're talking back 25 years ago. The technology wasn't there with what it is today. It was a breakthrough to be able to get to degree programs if they were offered in a niche setting. Examples from my discipline, clinical informatics, advanced degrees just started up back at that point. So if you wanted to go and take a degree from Oregon Health Sciences Universities, you had the choice of temporarily taking a flat in Portland and completing a degree. So it was a real breakthrough and a genuine innovation when they started to offer their degree program 100% online. Another example is from the other coast. Population health, the first sort of the pioneer group that started to offer that, looking back 25 years ago, was Harvard University. Since then, it's offered almost, the majority of schools, let's just put it that way. I don't want to say almost everyone, but the major clinical schools of medicine and clinical programs, health services programs offer an advanced option in population health. At that time, the option was East Coast or nothing else. And so in that sense, we started the beginning of disruption. And again, comparing it with my previous experience of teaching in an auditorium, I do believe that those historic origins carry that vision of the classroom setting. And if you think about what a classroom setting is, I walk into the room, I start setting up, I set up my PowerPoint, I sort of arrange my notes. There is a circle of students around me already bouncing questions by me. Then I move on to the main section of my program, the content. Then as I exit, I continue on with a group of students in casual sort of hallway conversations. So in this first wave of online educations, we paid a lot of attention to make sure that we authentically and with integrity grab all the content that mattered for a particular degree program, and we represented it to the best of our ability online, but it was asynchronous. And sort of that interaction piece, the hallway conversation piece was stripped away for it. Technology wasn't there either. So when you think about the feedback at that time was also really asynchronous, days in between assignments and submissions, right? Students submitted, maybe 2 days later, got a feedback from me. And if I have a one-word essence of that first wave, is really about convenience. Moving on to, as the education world became really comfortable with the online education format, and the degrees that we are offering, certainly the health informatics degree, the data science degree out of Regis University are 100% fully online degrees, but you see non-traditional degrees being offered as fully online, like physical therapy or like fine arts, right? So we see a great movement of opening up in terms of what has become acceptable to be offered fully online. We also see a strong evolution of interactive technologies. I have now the underpinnings of that technology framework that allows me to demonstrate, allows me to give a better feedback modality. However, if I'm considering the continuum of asynchronous to synchronous, the current technology gets me closer to near synchronous or pseudo-synchronous, but it's not technically there. I am sort of the essence that I'm moving into in the second phase, moving from the content-centeredness to user or student-centeredness. And I'm getting into the tools that allows me to give instantaneous feedback in some of the cases, if it's a sort of a test quiz, a learning lab, maybe video feedback that is recorded relatively close in time, but I still have a sense of delay in that. What my growing sense is, as we are spending a lot of our thinking in folding in better and better tools to make our content livelier, fun, engaging, as well as pedagogically effective. So my learning assessment is in its place. I started to have a growing sense that I need to give feedback with a longer term view, what I call the long-term view. And those two other levels, in my mind, are coming back, my experience, at a course level and at the degree level. And when I'm talking about what's the significance of the course, what's the significance of the degree in the career of a graduating master's students who will use what they learned and embed themselves in a knowledge area, in a discipline area. What is the connection there? How much of that did I cover in my 36 credit hours? I feel that I started to have the need to be very intentional about those type of interactions with the students. Where this need is emerging, we have conducted exit interviews with students. Sometimes they are used for marketing purposes, right? Like, this was great and I hit the ground running, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is really understanding what part of the program was most useful for our graduating students. And that's true both in data science and in health informatics. We conduct exit surveys. Those are automatic surveys that kick in at the point of taking the last course, and then they come back again to the same set of students 6 months after leaving basically the Regis degree. It's popping up in informal communications that students want to understand how a course and how a degree fit into their bigger picture of a career path, of a field of knowledge, a discipline area. So we have 2 solutions for that. And I definitely want to hear your pushbacks, ideas, examples when we get there. One solution is at the course level, as the student is making its way through the course, there is a standard statement posted on sort of on the margin, calling out that this is the brick in the building. This is the role of the course in the big picture of what you're working on as you're working towards your degree. And then in terms of the degree communications, we started to have these face-to-face, very directed interactions. So non-online, not asynchronous. It is online, it is Zoom-based, but it's very brief. And that is a key piece to it. So I came up with the informal name, Information Burst. I actually adapted this idea from healthcare. There have been a well-documented and really interesting series of studies actually coming out of Iowa, where they started to experiment with patients' dissatisfaction with their interaction with their physicians. And so they created an environment when the physician puts everything to the side, and for no longer than 7-8 minutes, they have a locked-in, face-to-face, full attention interaction with the patient. And the physicians are trained for this. And so the patient positive commentaries and patient satisfaction went through the roof in the positive response of getting to this. So in a way, we adapted this in our setting. So these information bursts are not about advising. They are not about what additional electives can you take. They're not about assignments. We create separate spaces for that. These are really designed to get that restoration of the whole way interaction. Why does it matter if you pursue data science? Why does it matter if you pursue health informatics? How does the structure of our courses support you in your vision? That type of a longer view. And what we found is, and this is, serendipity, which then prompted me to put my proposal in and wanting to come to this conference and wanting to hear really a peer exchange of ideas. do you guys have the same sense? Just 1 week, a number of my former students came back and sort of expressed gratitude for these type of hallway conversations that were Zoom based. And they were long distance one, right? So we are Denver located. One of them was employed in Florida, the other couple of them on the West Coast, and a couple from Colorado. It was just one of those, like, it never happens. What is the chance of so many students reaching out at the same time, all referring back to these conversations that were very intentional and sort of a placing conversation. Your degree will make you powerful in this part of the health informatics universe. I have versions of that occurring in other settings. So a former student, again, gets employed in a robotics setting, comes back, has questions. My answer is, pull out the course notes from such and such class. See how those are actually really relevant to the questions you were asking me, and then get engaged with that longer view of what makes sense in a knowledge area, in a discipline area. Again, versions of that. We have a course that is not well liked, but everybody understood that it's necessary. It's on developing measures. And so we are wrestling with it because it's not an easy one to complete. But once they see the students see the relevance of it when they get employment, I have now data scientist students coming in wanting to understand how to develop measures, even though they are not intending to get a career in healthcare. And the course is definitely relevant, sort of business programs, business degrees that are offered out of the Anderson College. So you have these conversations that are based on the content area, but they create a much wider scope of relevance and a much wider scope of significance in terms of the knowledge area that we're talking about. And I would love to hear when we get here, you know, what are your experiences about it? So sort of in a summary, I feel like the first wave of online education was all about access to content remotely. The second wave was our educators awakening of trying to catalyze a better engagement. And this third piece that I feel urgency about is these microbursts of face-to-face interactions to get the magic of inspiring the students back into the interaction. This is why it is worthwhile to get you on that career. And this is the part that is really strong because you went through our degree program. So that's what I'm circling back. What my original statement is all about, that we need to think about feedback in tiers, in different levels. Right now, we spend a lot of time, much needed time, on giving a lot more lively, dynamic interaction opportunities with our weekly content delivery modalities. I'm thinking there is a great need for a long view. Where does the course fit in? Where does the degree fit in into the bigger knowledge area? And then, even though it's fully online, there is a need for this clearly designated information bursts, information rushes that needs to be protected so it doesn't drift into something else, like advising, like something else. So what happens is, I got to the point that I'm asking adjuncts in the program to provide for this. And we have adjuncts who are currently executive leaders in healthcare facilities. So the initial reaction is, well, you know, I don't really have the time for this. I'm sharing my expertise, but face to face, one-on-one. And once they commit to it, we're scheduling it for 15 minutes, but it's anticipated that it's really going to be less than 10. It's just sort of opening up the vision of what is possible based on the foundation that they're getting in the course, they're getting in the degree. I have now a couple of my adjuncts fully sold to this model. So then, you know, like the feedback type, one type is this content, make it more engaging, more dynamic, more interactive, more colorful, more fun. And feedback two, I feel we need to figure out how to even ask the right questions, what this long view of feedback two is. And feedback three, I really feel that we need these microbursts of real presence when I can recreate my former hallway conversations. So this is my framing few slides. What I was hoping that we can look at 3 questions and spend just a few minutes in the 3 questions. And my preference would be, and I need to ask, you know, Kristen's approval if that's okay, instead of being static and posted in your chat room, I'm okay talking over each other and just sort of, if that happens, we wait and the next one goes. But I want to hear a thumbs up from Kristen, and I follow directions if you're not okay.
I absolutely appreciate the concern, but the fact is this is your session. We will run it how you choose. And so folks, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourselves if you wish. If you prefer to type in the chat, I can translate that for you all, but anybody should be able to unmute and offer their thoughts on what Judit has presented here.
So thank you. I appreciate it. And what I wanted to hear is, what is your guys' experience now with the type 1 feedback? So I started to move in more dynamic way of interacting with my weekly content. Prior to the pandemic, I even experimented with those whiteboard sort of comic figures to explain concepts. I gotta say it went away with the pandemic. I also gotta say that I'm missing it. I'm missing it myself, but I haven't had the time to go back and start developing some more. I stole that particular idea from finance faculty. They, you know, felt the need that they needed to explain complex concepts in that sort of fun, cartoonish sort of way. So that's my way currently. I do want to further explore how I can, you know, if, again, back to that continuum from fully asynchronous to almost there. I want to push towards this really interactive way of teaching the content, of engaging the students. But as a first take, I wanted to hear some examples that you guys currently offer, you're thinking about offering. What's on your plate now in terms of type 1 feedback? Anyone?
Well, I'll start up. My name is Taimee Clark. I teach ESL at Ames Community College. And so this particular session was extremely important to me as I move into developing online ESL courses, because of course, when you're teaching English as a language, you have to do all four modalities: listening, speaking, writing, and reading. And content, quite honestly, has always been kind of a puzzler, because how do I adequately do the speaking and listening? And that's why I was really loving what you were talking about in terms of feedback, in terms of using whiteboards, which I've used. I do online annotations all the time. But this, moving it, if it's an asynchronous course, which is primarily what we're talking about here, I think, how do you develop engaging ways to give that feedback about content or anything else, so that you feel like you're engaged and not just typing things on a page? And for me, I have begun to experiment with not video conferencing, but creating videos myself, and then having students create videos in response, so that we have sort of an asynchronous video message thing going on.
Thank you, Tammy. Anyone else?
I will say yes to that. And also, some of our faculty have adopted VoiceThread, a tool that will allow everyone to operate in text or video along a timeline. And that timeline could be a video or images or documents.
Thank you, Gloria. Is it on your radar screen to sort of push it to the next frontier? So VoiceThread and video, and maybe now maybe some graphic tools of answering quiz questions. So it's not simply a check mark, but some graphics involved as they answer a quiz question. Something of a visual in exchange of ideas.
Yes, so we also work with faculty on signaling things through graphics. So they can do that in a video. When they're in classroom, we do untethered lecture capture, people moving around with iPads, capturing what they are signaling on the iPad that shows on the projection screen, can also show in Zoom for students who are at a distance, and then can be recorded for review. So we're blending all of these things. And then being able to help the learners learn how to use the videos so that they can be effective in driving it into long-term memory, as opposed to just cramming things into short-term memory. So we do a lot of work in that area.
Thank you. Anyone else? Things you already use, things that's on your radar to try out. I think, Claire, you have a raised hand. Shout.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Claire Kajura. I teach psychology at Essex County College in New Jersey. And one of the things we do with our online students is they do presentations, and they voice record their presentations. So it adds a humanness to the presentation. They're able to express themselves. And at some point would ask them to just do the audio, but now we also ask them to do the visual. So they add a face to their presentation, and then the rest of the students will respond to those presentations in short recordings as well.
Thank you, Claire. Anyone else? So I'm gonna then, I feel that those of us who started to use these additional interactive technologies started to experience sort of the benefit of creating a cohesion, creating a cohort of community like in the class, which I certainly agree with. I use video recordings myself, and it changes the tone of the class. I don't start out right away. In different classes, it's a different timing, but by the second or third week, we're asking everybody to put a video recording on a topic. And it changes the following week's textual exchange. We start relating to one another as a community. So I appreciate the comments. Well, how do you guys feel about sort of my second question? Like, do you have a sense for needing this longer term? This is where this course works as a brick in the big picture. This is what the degree does in the world of whatever career you're pathing. Do you, whatever career path you're embarking upon, do you have that sense, or sort of, am I an outlier in feeling this way? I'm okay if I am. It's a genuine brainstorming. What is your sense? Anyone?
I'll say that I don't think you are an outlier. I think what I see in this is a very strong program assessment strategy, so that all faculty and all students can articulate what the map is and what the courses contribute to the program learning outcomes, so that a student can see the significance and what to focus on, and as well as faculty in their backward design in courses, handling those outcomes.
Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
I actually have something.
Yeah, go.
So I actually do not work at a formal education institution. I actually work at a financial institution.
Yep.
And one of the things that we have noticed about our employees on a scale of, degreed students, non-degreed students, and tenured employees is that feedback is really hard for them to receive. And so we are trying to integrate a feedback culture because they perceive feedback to be simply criticisms. And so working really hard to build into our courses that feedback isn't just telling you right or wrong or how you're doing your job wrong, but is really like this conversation. And so I really liked what you said about being able to create microbursts where you're recreating hallway conversations with people. And I think that that's really important. And I think it's something that people are still looking for in financial, or I guess in the workforce, that they're not getting.
I certainly had that sense. Thank you for sharing this, Alyssa. And it sort of jumped at me, and I said that earlier. It moved me to push sort of a proposal towards this conference, and wanting to hear an audience feedback on this, that we need to find ways of recreating these hallway conversations that are about the big picture. And so they are casual enough, they are short enough, but they walk that over. And I love the way Gloria said it, that it's really a program assessment strategy. And I really like that as well. It's a harder one, right? Because we try to, or we're pushing to stay within the micro world of the course. And now we're breaking that apart. We are saying, you're standing on the content of the course, but I'm asking you to look further out for relevance. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I just want to, since I would like to have more discussion, but I'm going to circle back to Alyssa, what your comment was about receiving or not receiving well any feedback, whether it's criticism or perceived as negative. I certainly noticed that it needs to be cultivated in the courses of getting in the habit of pro and con, right? Of putting something out there and say, inviting the students, now push back, but push back with a rationale, right? Like I say something, challenge me on it, or what could be challenged, what I just said, what could be a different perspective. So to get into the students, make it into a habit to focus on the issue and approach it with pro and con rationale, and not think that it's a personal criticism of that feedback. So the part that to me is really important, what you said, is what I also like to think about a lot, of how we continue to cultivate that look for the opposing point of view, look for that critical assessment of whatever is happening. I put an article in front of the class. Don't just tell me how you agree with it, tell me how it possibly raises some concerns for you, whatever that article is. And I'm not talking now about, like everyday news items. It's from the knowledge base, but still it's a habit building, right? For students to get comfortable thinking about, oh, can I challenge this? It is from a university. How do I challenge it in a meaningful way, in a logical way? So moving to sort of the third type of feedback, which means that I'm pushing against the evolution of online, which is 100% online. I'm really breaking it and say, the convenience, you can get to the content anytime, you pace it to yourself, etc., all those things. Now I'm saying, find a time to meet with me, even if it's for a short time. What is your experience with that? Do you do it? Do you find it hard? Do you find it, let's be a little bit more controversial, do you find it that you're breaking your own commitment that it's a 100% online class, and now you're asking for a schedule to show up? How does that translate in your experience? Anyone? Do you guys have interactions in online classes, in like Zoom based, or is it all just within the course shell and it stays within the content framework?
So I'll say this about our organization. So our team is new, and what we are focused on is doing blended and asynchronous courses. And previous to our team starting about a year ago, you were either fully in person or the only online experience you had was a compliance course. So right or wrong, check the box. And so I think, at least for us in our context, the shift to being fully online in the workforce is difficult because people are still wanting a human connection, but they're wanting it at a time that is convenient for them. And so I think this third type is very important, because you don't want to remove the human connection, the human piece from an online course, but you want it to be, and I think it was Gloria that was talking about, like in a timeline where people can track what the comments were and what the videos were. And so I think for us, our hurdle is how do we do that effectively? Without saying like, oh, well, we'll just put everything in a discussion post and you can scroll through that thread. I think it's something that we're looking really hard at, and we don't have a solution yet.
Yeah, I agree, Alyssa, with what you were saying. I mean, some of the larger classes, so it's 22 students in a graduate course, that's difficult to actually squeeze in, particularly wanting to honor the online part of the commitment. And if you have the working professionals coming back for a degree, it does take a lot of flexibility from the instructors to say, I'm willing to do this after hours, or I'm willing to do this, you know, or whatever, early morning. And just that level of flexibility to create the space for the face-to-face interaction and sort of a face-to-face check-in. Anyone else? How do you feel about it? I mean, I find that definitely disruptive in that sense. That are we going against the grain with this sense when we are committed to offer a 100% online degree program? What is your thinking? Anyone?
This is Jennifer, and I will just add that I do teach fully online, and what I do is record my lectures. I've tried to have them live, and with students, they're online for a reason, right? Whether they're working during the day, they're running kids at night, whatever it might be, you can't get everyone to the same spot at the same time, I found. So I record them, and then I link an assessment around students watching that recording. Whether I build discussions around it, have quiz questions about it, something to kind of measure that engagement from that recording.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else?
Yes, hello. I'm a instructional designer at a law school, and I work primarily on an asynchronous program. It's like it's a master's of legal studies, so it's a lot of people who are seeking to become compliance officers or gain the credentials to do something of the sort. And a lot of them are working adults. We have experimented in recent semesters with setting up synchronous meetings, Zoom sessions, and so on in our classes. Even though it's an asynchronous class, we can't force students to attend at a certain time. We've kind of gone back to some traditional ways of motivating students using extra credit, so perhaps having a poll somewhere in the early part of the class where you ask students, are you available in any of these 4 nights that the professor is available for a live session? And if they can attend, they would get some sort of extra credit, but obviously if they can't, it's fine because there's no penalty involved. In other classes, we've made the live session required, but if a student answers in the poll that they definitely can't make it, then there's like an asynchronous replacement assignment that uses the recording of that live session after it happened, something like that. We have a faculty member in another class who, well, it seems to me like he's going back to something like oral exams from a master's or doctoral program where he's recording a kind of podcast with his students. He has students go research something and then they get together live and they discuss the topic that they've researched. Now, I don't know if that's quite the sort of information burst that you're speaking of in this presentation, because it's really targeted and it is expressly academic work. Like it's on topic, it is content, but that is, again, like a live opportunity for student and faculty to interact with each other, to talk about the field and so on. That breaks with the asynchronous structure. And we schedule it far enough in advance where it doesn't seem to be a problem. So those are some things that we're trying in our program. I don't know if that quite hits at what you're aiming at, but we're
Yes,
kind of in the vicinity.
And Nick, just a follow-up question. Do you have a sense that it's very well received by the students, that there is a sort of a sense of hunger for it? Do you have that sense?
My sense is that yes and no. As some of the other people here have said, the students who sign up for this sort of program want to be able to do everything when they want to do it, and they're busy, and so there's all those considerations. So I feel like there is some resistance when you say, here is a requirement that is synchronous or live, or here's an opportunity. They may pass it by because their mindset is sort of, well, why would I do that? That's not what an online class looks like. I get the sense you want to push against that paradigm, and that's probably a good thing. Others of them, though, are very excited to get the chance to interact with our professors. And in some classes, we have professors who are more, I don't know what you want to call it, like outgoing, charismatic, personal types. And if those sorts of professors don't offer live sessions or, you know, opportunities to interact with them other than the usual, I have office hours at this time, feel free to call, which hardly anyone ever does, apparently.
Right.
Then we have students complain that I would have really liked to get in contact with Professor Reynolds or whoever it is, because they seem to be someone who would, like, I could have a conversation with, strike up a conversation, learn about the field and so on. So it doesn't come up evenly across the classes, but we get glimmers of it here and there. The final thing I'd say in response to your question is just that in those courses where we create these live sessions, not all students can attend, but we're getting like 80–90% of students to attend, and I'm not hearing many complaints after the fact. So I don't know if they're out there or not. So we've only been doing it maybe 2 or 3 terms perhaps, so we're sort of early on in it, but I think we're going to keep moving in this direction.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love what you just said, just with a real passion. Because what happens in my world is the first round is hard for all the reasons that we just shared, right? Like I work late, I have a job, I have a family, et cetera, et cetera. But if I manage to get the students to get to that first one, then the magic happens and I have no problem with the second one. And it comes up in course evaluation as one of the things that they enjoyed the most, because it's really quick, right? So it's not a soapbox kind of, it really just sort of trying to get that, that energy, that warmth going. Anyone else?
Just to, Randall has posted in the chat, I've used avatar-based platforms like GatherTown and Mozilla Hubs for synchronous sessions in asynchronous courses. And then he's offered a couple of links in the chat to GatherTown and Mozilla Hubs.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I think what I wanted to do is just put out my contact there. I appreciated everybody's comments. I am really excited about the type of paradigm shift that this morning in the morning opening session, presenters started to think about and talk about. I think online environment is here to stay. But we can do a lot of that magic energy put back into our interactions just by checking in a brief, structured way. So I'm excited of what we can do to think about the paradigm shift in online. And I think Kristen and I were talking as we were coming into this session that there's gonna be sort of a summation discussion of this at the very closing of these 2-day online sessions. So I'm very, very curious about that and very excited about it. Because if you think about it, the many opportunities you as a person can take learning things online and sort of expanding your world online. And we can just definitely magnify that to our students. But it's not only about the content. There is certainly a way of thinking that we want to teach. That's part of our learning objectives, a way of thinking in a particular discipline. And so there needs to be an optimal path of how to convey that part of the pedagogical magic, if I want to put it that way. So I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. That was a really interesting session to get to mostly sit and listen in on.
Thank you, Kristen.